Hello and welcome to this brief session all about maintaining and creating an RSO internal ledger. My name is Joe Littell and I'm with SOA. We'll give you a bit of background for today's brief session, go over the value of documents from SOFO, as well as your own internal financial file, which you'll have control over, managing the access and some decisions around who's able to edit, and then we'll do a brief demo of how to set up this file. So to get started, SOFO, or the Student Organization Finance Office, is the authority on all university financial procedures, regulations around fundraising and expenses, and general financial activity. SOA is not best suited to answer questions in terms of payments, rules around use of funds, or what funds groups have at their disposal. However, we still wanted to offer a brief session on maintaining and planning for a budget beyond what SOFO offers in their training. So part of the reason to include this as well is that financial management is a lifelong skill. It's very different than it was a generation ago in terms of all the technological tools that are available, the synchronization of online banking with budgeting apps and more. But this is often the first opportunity for students to step into an organizational role where they're going to be responsible for managing a group budget. It can also be a really challenging and stressful part of organizations that have a high volume of financial activity. A group that is really one-dimensional in its activity and maybe just has a monthly cost for either a program subscription or just an anticipated recurring fee, those tend to be really easy to manage. But anything that involves bringing speakers to campus, performing arts, putting on major events, collecting fees from members, etc., there's a lot to track. And SOA thanks you for taking on that duty. So to get started, if you're SOFO trained, then you already know that SOFO is able to provide you some summary reports of recent activity, balance, things that are actual and are reflected in your account balance. It's also necessary to maintain your own internal file because that SOFO document isn't going to include anticipated expenses or account for foreseen expenses, also known as non-encumbered. They're likely accounted for. It's going to be what you use an allocation for or how you plan ahead. But just looking at the SOFO document, if it's showing a balance of $500 remaining in your account, you need to have a plan of how you're going to spend that $500 most likely. Because of that, SOFO documents might not provide the most accurate financial situation. For example, if you put on an event and you use Northwestern catering for your reception, the event might be done and your balance in your account might show $1,200 available for your group, but that catering bill might not hit for another 5 to 10 weeks. It's unfair to say, hey, look, we have $1,200, let's buy everyone merch. You need to account for that catering invoice just because it isn't reflected in your SOFO summary yet. So both these things are necessary to be a high quality budget planner for your organization. A common question is, okay, so whose responsibility is it to create and update an internal ledger or financial file? Now that collaborative and shared files are so readily available to student groups, just through individual Google accounts and other software, it's great to allow people to access that and see a snapshot of the organization's financial state. However, allowing too many people access to edit it can often lead to confusion. If you have every single officer able to go in and say, oh, look, this isn't accounted for, I'm going to edit a row, that might mess up the accuracy of what the financial manager is trying to do for your group. Our recommendation is to allow edit access for only 1 or 2 individuals who are most commonly responsible in interfacing with SOFO. Everyone else may have view access to get a sense of what the budget looks like and what to anticipate, but limiting the edit access is really key. This should also be on the agenda for organizations that have a medium to high volume of financial activity every exec board meeting. So folks have a clear sense of what the budget looks like for the next event, as well as for the organization as a whole. They can identify where the gap might be, which might occasion the group to apply for grants or seek funding through other avenues. Okay, well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and just offer a very brief demo of how to set up an internal file in the event your organization does not have one already set up. So in this case, I created a Google Sheets file. I have edit access. And you'll notice the workbook has a sheet dedicated to each line in the account. Just about every student organization finance account is going to have an ASG allocation. Every organization will also have operations funding, which includes the revenues that are really everything else besides your ASG funding. Some organizations will also have a gift account. If you're running a catalyzer campaign to fundraise for a need above and beyond your ordinary organization activities, if you're set up for alumni, families of students involved in the group, and other parties to make donations, you may see this line reflected as well. In terms of a best practice, use the money that's most restricted first per the arrangement that you were given that money. So what does that mean? Well, if ASG gave you $4,500 with the understanding that you'd use $2,500 towards a fall speaker event on campus and $2,000 for a winter student social event on campus, use that money first. Operations funding has the least amount of restriction. So for some groups, it might be treated as a cushion. In some cases, it is still restricted based on the nature it was given. Could be money transferred over from an academic department, and there might be an expectation that you're submitting a report that explains how you spent their money each year. But ASG funding goes through that extra level of approval, and I've seen groups make mistakes before where they only spend out of their operations, they don't use their ASG money, and then that money gets rolled back, and it's just a waste. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about how this is set up. It's fairly straightforward. You're going to get a financial summary of recent activity from SOFO. And wherever that balance is today, that's going to be your starting revenue. You'll account for any other upcoming expenses and run a formula to calculate how much money you have. Now, in this case, I put negative numbers here, and I formatted the cells to reflect accounting. You can use other items to either show that this is an expense that we're going to need to account for, such as using italics, even though we haven't actually been billed it, or we haven't necessarily planned to spend it, but this is the allocation. So this is what I mean when I say, okay, look, we're getting $2,500 for the speaker. Well, let's break that down a little bit in terms of how we're going to spend it. I also recommend keeping a notes column to give a sense of where things are at, especially if they are not reflected in the SOFO column or SOFO expense file. Details to include, of course, are going to be dates, date last updated, any other details regarding the payment, including the vendor, as well as that form ID if it does go through the SOFO expense form online. Very similarly, if you're reimbursing folks, you're going to want to go ahead and use the SOFO form reference number. And if it's money coming out of the same account line, you can attach multiple files to the same form submission. So in this case, we collected receipts from students who are going to get reimbursed. And because it's coming out of the same line and the money is going to reimburse the same member of the organization, we have the same SOFO form ID. That said, we are accounting for each item here, just for good accounting practice. And then lastly, if italics suggests what you're planning to spend and you want to make sure that funding is protected and you don't go over your balance, You can also use an asterisk, which allows you to put a value in this column, but it won't impact the formula. In this case, our gift account line has a $0 balance. We don't have any activity in here, but we're planning to apply for Catalyzer with a fundraising campaign goal of 5,500. So we might take the asterisk off of this once that campaign gets approved and once we've actually hit that $5,500 fundraising level. Basic stuff. I recognize 90% of you have inherited something like this already, but in the event that this is an even better version than what you currently have, or you find yourself where the numbers just aren't adding up, or if you really need to create your own from scratch and then pass that on to your successor, we hope this has been helpful. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure to take the quiz at the end of this section.